At the height of the Empire, Stormtroopers became one of the primary symbols of Imperial power projection across the galaxy. While the Star Destroyer and TIE Fighter may have been equally iconic, for most of the galaxy's inhabitants, the most likely interaction with one of those symbols would have been with the Stormtroopers rather than some of the Empire's starships. As the command structure of the Imperial military solidified after the Clone Wars, Stormtroopers kept a place parallel to the organization of the Army and Navy, though they were directly part of neither and were used in roles as elite soldiers and pacifiers of the galactic population. For many alien species, seeing a Stormtrooper was often the first step in a life of servitude, but did any aliens serve as Stormtroopers? The initial Stormtrooper Corps was made up of clone troopers. This includes not just troopers from the Camino cloning programs, but also other programs like the Arcanian G-Node clones, who we've covered on the channel before. This means that at first, not only was the Stormtrooper Corps entirely human, it was still for the most part all clones of one particular human. This actually goes along with one of the hallmarks of the new Stormtroopers, which is kind of ironic considering where they came from, which was a move back to even more uniformity and equipment among the Stormtroopers and ending all self-expression amongst the clones in their ranks. The Phase 2 armor program the clone troopers had included many units and even individuals having unique markings, and all of that was scrapped in favor of the simpler, ubiquitous design of Stormtrooper armor, staying with the standard white. And even further standardization of equipment, including the new E11 blaster rifle, though different equipment would obviously be used for different jobs. Some unique and specialized forces did also regain some element of unique armor markings or armor design types, though much more rarely than at the height of the Clone Wars. You'd think it would be hard to clamp down on diversity more than having a clone army, but the Empire did it. While the recruitment and conscription of new soldiers was used as a cheaper and more efficient way to supplement the clone troopers, especially as there was less need for a battle-bred army for a galactic-scale war, this force would remain almost entirely human, partially because of the prejudices that existed, and partially for the optics of one uniform force. Women were allowed into the service, although less commonly than men, but the Stormtrooper Corps remained a largely human-exclusive entity for the entirety of the Emperor's lifetime at least. Now there were a few exceptions to this, though it was generally only in the case of specific units and experiments, and these instances were always kept classified. One such unit was a squad of Tesserial Stormtroopers, a massive species which required heavily modified Stormtrooper armor. This squad was commanded by General Scar, who was introduced in the original Marvel comics along with the troopers, and then retconned as a Kaleesh, the same species as General Grievous, by the hyperspace article Aliens in the Empire. While these instances were rare under the Empire itself, after Endor, the attitudes among Imperial offshoot states and successor states evolved for a variety of reasons. In some examples, like the Empire of the Hand, there was simply less prejudice against non-humans active. In the Empire itself, the change came as much from desperation and a need to take advantage of all available resources as from any real change of heart on human supremacy among the leadership. There were some individuals who did spearhead that change, but had there not been the same need, it's questionable how much that would have taken root. In the Empire of the Hand, an empire set up by Thrawn in the unknown regions with some Imperial connections maintained, there were at least 8 species mentioned as being within the reformed Stormtrooper Corps, including humans and a reptilian species called the Ikari in Survivor's Quest by Timothy Zahn. In the Empire itself, by the time Natassi Dalla is reuniting the Imperial warlords in 12 ABY, or years after the Battle of Yavin, in the novel Darksaber, there are mentions of multiple non-human species serving as stormtroopers. It seems unlikely that this was a change made directly by Dalla herself, considering how briefly she was actually in charge, unless the training program went incredibly quickly, though Durga the Hutt, who's the one who describes this to Leia, implies that the inclusion of women and aliens was actually her doing. She was in charge for less than a year though, so I don't think the timeline really works for that, though I guess that's kind of open for interpretation, and as stated in the text, it does seem to be meaning to imply that that was Dalla's doing, because one of the things that Dalla does talk about is that she disagreed with the Empire and the Emperor in particular on the prejudice against non-humans and women in particular for her situation. It seems to me that it's more likely this would be something that had begun happening by necessity over the prior decade in different groups, and that Dalla just added an extra level of legitimacy to it when she took over. Your mileage may vary there, though. About a century later, by the time of the Fell Empire, non-human stormtroopers had become a common sight, and probably had been since the Fel Empire's inception, most likely around the year 45 ABY. This still seems somewhat notable as a change even compared to the Empire of the Hand and Dallas forces, since it seems to have been not just more common within the ranks to have non-humans, but the species admitted to the Stormtrooper Corps were more broad than just those with vaguely human body types, including some species like the Tals, which are pretty considerably different from standard human physiques. Under the Empire, they were generally previously not even seen as a sentient species, so this was a pretty big evolution. Tals had also tried to join the New Republic's Wraith Squadron, but had been so opposed to killing that Wedge had to reject them. It's suggested there that it's because Tals are just so inherently non-violent, but we do see them fight in other situations, so that seems to be more of a specific person retcon than anything. Either way, that's going to do it for our look at Alien Stormtroopers. If you've enjoyed, consider leaving a like or subscribing for more. If there's another topic you'd like to see me cover on the channel, please let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.